All right, let's dive right into this explainer. We're looking at a pretty incredible challenge today. How exactly do we preserve the memory of something as massive and world-changing as World War I, especially now that it ended well over a century ago? As time marches on, our physical ties to the past just slip away. But, as we're going to see, the way we document, remember, and honestly, literally resurrect history has evolved in some absolutely massive ways. We're looking at 3 landmark projects that completely rewrote the playbook on historical preservation and how we use primary sources.
So there's this central tension right at the heart of historical preservation. On one hand, we're constantly fighting against fading history. It's just the harsh reality, right? Physical primary sources decay, and the eyewitnesses who actually live through it inevitably pass away. But fighting back against that erasure, we have what we can call living documentaries. It's a literal race against time. Filmmakers and historians are constantly leaning on evolving tech, digging way deeper into the archives, and inventing totally new technical methods to resurrect the past and keep it vital for all of us today.
Just look at the chronological journey from the end of the war in 1918. We can pinpoint 3 massive leaps in historical storytelling: 1964, 2003, and 2018. At each of these jumps, filmmakers were working with a vastly different set of tools, and more importantly, a completely different kind of primary source. The methodology absolutely had to change, purely because the history itself was aging out of living memory.
Let's kick things off with 1964, Surviving Voices, the irreplaceable living memory.
We start by looking back at the 1960s. This was a time when a highly unique, literally irreproducible primary source was still walking around among us. The legendary BBC series The Great War relied entirely on the living memory of actual veterans to communicate the history firsthand. I mean, think about what a distinct advantage that is. They didn't have to guess what it sounded like or felt like in the trenches. They just turned on a camera and asked the guys who were actually there. It's the ultimate primary source, the human voice of an eyewitness. Oh, and you can actually still watch this archived series for free on YouTube today.
And they didn't just do a quick surface-level overview either. This massive series spanned an incredible 26 episodes. By dedicating that much screen time, the BBC captured a vast, deeply personal, and highly comprehensive oral preservation of the conflict. They were effectively racing against the clock, grabbing hundreds of hours of primary human source material right before those voices began to fade away forever.
Moving forward, we hit 2003, Diaries and Archives, Physical Preservation and Global Scope.
Okay, so by 2003, nearly all of that living memory was gone. So how do you preserve history when the eyewitnesses can't speak for themselves anymore? Well, the acclaimed 10-part series The First World War, which was based on Oxford history professor Hew Strachan's work, shifted the methodology entirely. To get a complete, highly accurate global understanding, they meticulously gathered physical, primary sources. We're talking real, handwritten diaries, intimate personal letters, and super rare archival footage. Because they weren't limited to just the British or American veterans they could easily track down for interviews, this technical methodology actually allowed them to cover a massive global scope. They brought in the Western Front, the Eastern Front, the Middle East, and Africa, completely reconstructing the war from paper and silent tape.
This really brilliantly illustrates the stark technological and methodological contrast between the two eras. In 1964, the method relied completely on direct, spontaneous interviews with living, breathing humans. But jump to 2003, and the method represents a total shift toward diligent physical preservation, synthesizing fragile artifacts, weathered letters, and rare archival tapes. The historians essentially had to become forensic investigators, piecing the whole narrative together from the physical remnants left behind.
Which brings us to our final leap, 2018, Digital Resurrection, the technological breakthrough of They Shall Not Grow Old.
Talk about injecting some serious energy into our timeline. Peter Jackson's 2018 feature-length film completely redefined technical preservation. To really grasp the sheer effort required here, you gotta look at the steps. First, his team went into the British Imperial War Museums and pulled heavily degraded 100-year-old archival footage for meticulous restoration. Then came a massive technological leap, adjusting the frame rates. See, century-old cameras were hand-cranked at varying speeds, usually just 10 to 16 frames per second, which is exactly why old footage always looks so jerky and artificially sped up. By smoothing those rates out to modern speeds, the soldiers suddenly looked like real, normal people. Next, they painstakingly hand-colorized every single frame. And finally, they added incredibly authentic audio.
Now, what is absolutely staggering here is exactly how they got that audio. They didn't just guess or slap some generic battlefield sound effects over it.
No way. They used forensic lip readers to study the silent film and figure out exactly, word for word, what the soldiers were saying to each other in the trenches back in 1914. Then, they hired actors with specific regional accents to dub those exact words back in. They effectively built a brand new, authentic auditory primary source out of completely silent century-old film. It is just a stunning achievement in technical historical preservation.
This whole process brings us to a concept we're calling digital resurrection. It's this intense technological process of revitalizing degraded century-old media. Through high-res restoration, precise frame rate adjustment, and careful hand colorization, technology is literally bridging a 100-year gap. It takes history out of those dusty archives and makes it visually and emotionally accessible for modern viewers who are just streaming it on platforms like Apple TV or Amazon Prime today. It forces us to see the past not as some distant, abstract concept, but as a vibrant, living reality.
Let's bring it all together. Preserving our past, the synthesis of historical storytelling.
As we wrap up this explainer, let's take a beat to reflect on how these distinct methods combine. Our journey today reveals a super clear evolution. Back in 1964, our primary source focus was the living memory of surviving veterans. By 2003, that methodology absolutely had to shift to preserving physical diaries, letters, and archives. And then, by 2018, we hit the pinnacle of digital restoration, using advanced algorithms and lip readers on silent footage to ensure we never forget what these people endured. It really shows us that as human primary sources inevitably fade away, our archival and digital technologies have to relentlessly step up to fill that void.
You know, history is never really finished. It just requires new tools to be heard. So I want to leave you with this provocative thought, something that really challenges our modern understanding of memory, media, and tech. When the last eyewitness of our current era finally fades, how will your history be preserved? Will it live on in servers, deep in data centers, or through technologies we haven't even dreamed up yet? Thanks for joining me on this deep dive, and keep questioning how we remember the world around us.